Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Demetrius DeLoatch. Thank you all so much for joining me this morning. And I am here to talk about knowledge being power and how to navigate the policymaking system that we have within the state of North Carolina. Number one, thank you all so much for joining today for the NC Child 2022 Kids event. So let's go ahead and jump in, shall we? Again, I just want to, number one, take a moment to recognize NC Child for the prestigious work that they do and their diligent efforts to destroy the barriers that many children experience on their way to achieve success and greatness. So thank you all at NC Child, and to all the organizations that are present, thank you all so much for everything that you do to ensure that the children of North Carolina have a very promising future, regardless of their outcome, regardless of their background, and where they may come from. Thank you all so much. If it's okay, I would like to start with a brief introduction about myself. Again, my name is Demetrius DeLoatch. I have been doing government relations in the state of North Carolina for over 7 years now. I started as an intern and went directly into lobbying. I've been a lobbyist registered with the North Carolina Secretary of State for around 6 of those years now. So I have very good experience in public affairs, advocacy, government relations, and of course, lobbying. I have lobbied on behalf of North Carolina cities and towns, all 552. I did that with the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and more of my career has been around lobbying for private corporations. So now I'm currently with a company called APCO Worldwide, we will discuss later on. But of course, one of the things that I always do is lobbying. I'm always in the General Assembly, practically known as the guy that lives there because I'm there by 7:30 in the morning and I don't leave until the business is done. So I participate in these panel discussions all the time. I definitely do a lot of the active lobbying. And whenever I'm finished lobbying, I have the honor and the privilege of serving as an adjunct professor at St. Augustine's University here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh is where I live at, and St. Augustine's is a private HBCU here in good old Raleigh, North Carolina. Me being an HBCU graduate myself from Elizabeth City State University, I take great pride in being able to enlighten and enrich the minds of the next generation of leaders for our great state and for our great nation. I earned my political science degree from Elizabeth City State University. I attended North Carolina State University the spring of 2015, where I was a participant in their legislative internship program. This is also where I began my internship with the North Carolina Senate and later the North Carolina House of Representatives. And of course, during that time, I'm a glutton for punishment. For whatever reason, I decided to enroll immediately into a graduate school degree program. I enrolled at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro in their Master of Public Affairs and Public Administration department, and that is my background. We'll touch on a couple of things later on, but that is just who you are, who you have with you this morning, and I'm very much looking forward to the very discussion that we're going to have. As previously discussed, I am a consultant with a company called APCO Worldwide. So APCO is a very prominent organization. It is a global public relations and communications consultancy. We are headquartered in DC, but we have offices all around the world. We have 31 around the world, and here in North America, in Raleigh, we serve as the hub for southeastern United States. So of course, our headquarters is in DC, but we also have offices in New York, Chicago, Seattle, and California, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. So some of the services that we provide are government relations and advocacy, of course, but we also deal with a lot of marketing, corporate communications, media relations, research and strategy, and crisis and litigation. The way I explain it to everyone that asks, I have not seen a single thing that we do not cover here at APCO just yet. So if there's ever anything that we can do for you all, please feel free to reach out. On this next slide, I'm going to give you guys a little bit more insight into what those main sectors of the services that we provide, how those actually look. So this is part of a deck that we always have and share with our clients, with our new business opportunities, and any person that we are giving an introduction to APCO. I specialize mostly in the left-hand corner with government relations and advocacy. but we have some of the best and some of the brightest individuals that I have ever had the opportunity to work with within this company. So if any of these things stick out to you as a need, or if you would like some insight, we at APCO have the ability to give you everything. We have people who have experience in nonprofits to DC, chief of staff individuals. We have people that specialize in communications. And again, there is literally nothing I have seen that we don't have a person who has done this before, and we have a very broad expertise. But of course, you know, we are here today to discuss my personal favorite area in the world, which is government relations and advocacy. So I am here to tell you all today how to navigate this complicated path that we have, and to give you insights and tips, and to answer any questions that you have. And for myself personally, I am a super extrovert. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have. Please feel free to reach out to me with questions that you have. And of course, I'm a super extrovert, so I love networking. I would love to network with each and every one of you, but we'll also cover that later on as well. So many people always ask, how did I become so engraved in this? It started literally with just a deep dislike for mathematics. And I was a person who was a straight A student in high school, but if I could walk out of math class with a B or a C, I would be ecstatic and walk on and have a happy life. However, it was in around my sophomore, junior year of high school where I really started to learn that I had a deep passion for government relations classes, such as civics and economics, history. My personal favorite was debate, and other classes that dealt with the realm of government relations and what we do basically here. So your American national government, your national government, international governments, and of course, language arts, which is the foundation of it all. That is where I found I actually look forward to going to class every day. It was to the point where my teachers would tell me I couldn't participate because the other kids in the class were leaning on me, which is always a good thing to have. So my teacher came to me one day and said, "Do you want to go to college?" I'm a first generation college kid. My mother and father told me from a very young age, I had no choice but to find a college that I loved. So that was what we did. We found a college, and my teacher helped me to realize that political science is what I needed to major in. So growing up in rural northeastern North Carolina, I cannot begin to tell you the amount of disparities that I saw, you know, from not being able to have broadband to not having, you know, excellent cell phone service. The lack of resources there was very, very prominent. However, I did not let that deter me and or stop me from achieving my dream. And honestly, I would say that experience growing in northeastern North Carolina is actually what fueled me and see why our way of life was so the opposite of affluent, honestly. So I witnessed firsthand what happened when people are apathetic. I witnessed firsthand when people become very satisfied with their current way of life and don't have a drive or desire to change anything. That all of those things combined, in addition to what I learned at Elizabeth City State through my internship and everything that I learned at UNCG and my time in DC as well. I actually spent a summer in DC. Through all of that, that is what showed me that this is where I belong. I thrive in it. I love it. And I get up at 5:30 every morning excited for whatever my day is going to bring in this realm. So let's go ahead and jump into the content, shall we? Why does advocacy matter? Again, I've told everyone, I've seen what happens when people are very apathetic about government. They don't want to vote. They don't believe it works for them. And there are a myriad of excuses that we always see of why people don't want to believe in this. However, here in the good old country of America, we have a government that is designed for us to make it work for us. Each member of our government is elected by us. We have a representative democracy here in America. Our members of government are elected by us, the eligible members of the public, and those individuals work for us. Those individuals who we elect, they have the opportunity to serve in an official capacity within government through their actions and their votes. And that is on the local level, at your local town halls, at the state level, here in the good old Raleigh, North Carolina, at 16 West Jones Street, and even in DC, in the Capitol. These are individuals who we put into elected positions, who our tax dollars paid their salaries, and we actually expect for them to represent us. Our votes matter, of course, and our elected officials who we vote for are supposed to be the representation of what we stand for as their elected their electorate people. So citizens, and what, what most people don't realize is majority of the power rests with we the people. However, it is whenever we do not enact that power that we don't see change. So we play the most critical role in our democracy. All power rests with us, and our elected officials, again, work for us. Our tax dollars that we pay, that pays their salary. So this is why it's very important. We cannot have a situation where we are not represented, and we actually have to hold them accountable. Believe it or not, there are some elected officials who become elected and forget how they got there and who they work for. So it is our job as elected as regular people and citizens to allow them and remind them, hey, we put you here. We expect for you to represent our interests on these various issues, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. And just to go on a little bit deeper about why advocacy matters, your voice is critical to ensure that legislators are conscious about the decisions that they make and how they are going to impact you. There is not a single piece of legislation ever formulated and passed and or voted on that will not impact some citizen in some way. Either it's through your job or it's through your everyday life. That is why it's imperative that legislators can hear from you. Their information and how you contact them is readily available online. Their information is available on the phone. And depending on where you are, you may be able to run into your elected officials in your area. So of course, being here in the local area, on the local levels of government, that is where it's the easiest time to find your council members. You can run into them at a coffee shop. Your state elected officials, you know, majority of the time, they're going to be here in Raleigh at 16 West Jones Street. And your congressional members actually have events, roundtable discussions, and they actually have to come home from DC eventually. So that is a time where you can run into them and let them know how you feel. And for my most vulnerable communities, and with our children being some of the most vulnerable in that number, those individuals are where legislation matters the most because they feel it the most. So we have a civic duty to ensure that elected officials know our position on bills. We have an official and a civic duty to ensure that elected officials know we are watching their actions, we are ensuring that they hear from us, and we let them know this legislation is going to help us or hurt us. And as we all know, many of the current issues that we are dealing with are going to require some form of legislation. So of course, it's easy for us to clean up our communities. It's easy for us to clean up our streets, to do local programs to try to help. But majority of the issues that we are going to face are going to need funding and going to require literally an act of Congress or some elected body. So issues dealing with energy, issues dealing with poverty, affordable housing, education, child resource programs, teaching, many of those programs are going to require funding. And the only way that we can get those things done is through elected officials, which is why your voice, your actions as the organizations that are listening to me right now, your voice and your actions are imperative to ensure that the kids are protected, that legislators know this is an issue, that legislators know we are here to be a resource to help you craft this legislation and get it through the legislative process, which is also something we're going to discuss later on. But these are some of the reasons why advocacy matters. So I hope that this rings a bell for some of you, and I hope that this inspires whoever that is not as active in advocacy to become active, because your life depends on it. Future generations are going to depend on it, and a single piece of legislation can impact your life and your family's life for decades to come. That is why it's imperative to have a seat at the table and to ensure that you are in that seat, you are present, and that you are knowledgeable about what is happening. So my favorite thing in the world is to discuss the legislative process. This is something that is available online to learn. And for many of us, I'm not quite as seasoned as some people that may be listening, but we remember Schoolhouse Rock, how to discuss how I'm only a bill. That is still holds very true today. But let's go ahead and look into how it works here in the good old state of North Carolina. Before we do that, let's talk about what is needed to be effective in advocacy. Understanding the issue is very critical because, again, legislators have a myriad of issues that are in their hands to address, and those issues have to be addressed as well, in addition to the problem that you have. So it's important that you understand the issue as an organization, as an individual, and as the entities that you represent to be able to go and have the dialogue about these issues. Knowing the legislative process and the rules therein, that is something that is critical, and that is what makes organizations very powerful and the most efficient and effective. Being able to articulate how this process is going to work to your constituencies or to your membership, that is something that people pay top dollar for, because not everybody understands it. But when you are able to understand this process, you can predict how your bills are going to go. You can be proactive, and we'll discuss all of that later on. But that is a very critical piece, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time to discuss the legislative process. Understanding the political dynamics, understand that, of course, Democrats and Republicans, there are caucuses, there are legislative committees. All of those things play a very critical part, which we're also going to discuss. And strategy. I'm a personal nerd for strategy because I love implementing strategy and making sure that everything aligns with how it's going to work out perfectly for the best interest of the clients that I represent. But for you all, the strategy is going to ensure that your organization's priorities, and especially the legislative priorities, are met. So that includes the bills that you want to pass. Of course, legislation is important, but also the relationships. So we're going to have a good discussion about relationships later on, but that is the last bullet point. The relationships that you create with the elected officials, they are very paramount, and especially with the staff, the community organizations that also align with you, and many other entities that can buy into the priorities and the goals that you all have. So let's talk about understanding the issue. As I've told you before, legislators have a myriad of issues that they are currently trying to deal with. But whenever you get in that face-to-face dialogue with your legislator, that is when you are able to show your expertise. And in that dialogue, that is how a legislator knows that they can trust what you're saying. So for your organizations, your lobbyists, your policy directors, every person that's going to have a hand in this effort, it is very important to understand and ensure that they understand the issue. So that involves conducting research, that involves having the data, the percentages, anything that will persuade a legislator to see something from your point of view. The data, and my personal favorite is the real life stories. You know, if you're going to have a commercial or some kind of advertisement, that is a way that would pull at the heartstrings to understand and let a legislator know how this is truly impacting them. And you have to have the ability to understand who this issue impacts and how. Pulling at the heartstrings is a wonderful thing. Also have to let a legislator know it's not just this individual, it's everyone from this sector, it's everyone from this side of town, it's everyone within the city, it's every person that has a kid, it's the adoptive family, it's the teachers. And since we're here talking about kids, it is every single entity that touches a child's life that is impacted by this specific issue. So ensure that all of your team members are on the same page. Share your data. At the end of the day, you are a team and you guys work together to create excellence for the organizations that you represent, which in turn creates excellence for the children that you all are representing. So share your data. Share and ensure that everyone understands what the legislative goals are and how you're going to go about doing them. And once you all have that data, practice on the ability to articulate the issue to a legislator. We're going to discuss that a little bit later on, but I'll go ahead and give you a preface to that. Legislators have a very short attention spans, and you may be able to only get their attention for maybe 10 minutes or less because they're constantly being pulled into committee, they're being pulled by other organizations, constituents, and there are so many issues that they have to deal with. So make sure that you are able to concisely articulate what the issue is, the crux of the problem, and be able to tell the legislator, this is why we need you on this. And practice being able to do that in under 10 minutes, which is something that, again, we'll discuss later on. And one thing that a lot of people don't look at is what have other states done? Believe it or not, many of the issues that we face here in North Carolina this is not the first state to endure those. So it may help if you are able to research and point out legislation that has been passed in other states that are comparable to us. So of course, you know, we're not a California, we're not in New York, you know, we're not a Florida, but other states that have similar population to us, similar political makeup to us, and similar issues to us, some of that legislation may be able to be helped in the composition of the legislation that you're trying to pass. And more than anything, understanding what is a good, favorable solution to you. You may not be able to get every single thing that you want, but what can you live with as an organization and for your membership and for your constituencies? Understand what is a favorable solution. Have that already in mind. Is it the passage of the bill? Is it including this amount of funding in the budget? Have what it is that you want and ready to go. And last thing but not least, what are other organizations positioned on this? Who will be your allies? Who is going to be your opposition? These are the things to think about, because it's great to build a coalition to be able to combine your efforts, because there's 170 legislators in the great state of North Carolina, and including, you got to be able to convince the governor as well. So it's good to have organizations that have relationships already established. It's good to have organizations in your corner who won't combat you on these issues. But of course, we know that everybody is not going to say yes to a bill. So be thinking about who these organizations are who will stand against you on this, and think about why. Being able to proactively think about why and how to combat those efforts will prove to be paramount in getting your bills passed. And now for the favorite part, understanding the legislative process. So this is one of the critical components, and being able to get your bills passed and being able to have everyone in place for what needs to be done. So one critical element is being effective and understanding the rules and the processes. So for example, of course, the rules are available on the North Carolina Legislative website, but did you know, and does your membership and your organization know, that every bill has to pass through the Senate or House Rules Committee before it can go to the floor for a final vote? Did you guys know that in 2019, the floaters were implemented, which is basically allowing certain members who are not assigned to a committee to be able to go to a committee and vote? That is what we call. So did you know that those are a thing? So when you're implementing your strategies, be able to say, hey, we need to make sure that we saw the committee members, but also that we went to go see the floaters in the event that they are called. So that is something that is going to be critical. Understanding the process, the rules, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Those are the things that will make you very, very effective in this. So based on, we all know Schoolhouse Rock, when a bill is composed, it immediately gets passed to a committee. In North Carolina, we have what is called first reading. So that is the introduction of a bill once it has been composed, and it's in a form where it can actually begin the legislative process. So based on the content that is in the bill, that is how we are able to predict which committees it's going to be heard in. Of course, I've already told you that it's going to hit a rules committee before it can go to a floor. So make sure that you are very comfortable with your rules chairman and the members who are on that. But also, what else is in the bill? Is there a health component to it? Is there an education component to it? Whatever component that is in that legislation can be heard in certain committees. And all of this is available on the legislative website. But of course, make sure that you understand, what are we asking to be in this bill? If we're asking for some money or something that deals with funding, you have to see your finance committee and your appropriations committee, which is where all budget bills are heard. Are we asking for something dealing with education? Is it K-12? Is it higher education? Those committees are going to be imperative for you as well. And of course, being present is one of the most imperative things ever. But of course, there's a difference between being present and doing a protest or doing a very large event, which is what we're going to discuss later on. But at the very least, when your bill is being heard in committee, ensure that somebody from your organization is present to report back about what happens. Be present so that you are able to hear what this member says. In case what they're saying is false information or they have a misunderstanding, you may be able to pull that legislator to a side, or depending on the organization that you're in, your relationships that you have, you may be able to even speak in committee while you're there. So that's a very important thing, being present and understanding how many votes do you need. You know that there are 120 legislators in the House, 50 in the Senate. How many do you need to get this bill passed into the next chamber? Who do you need to get these bills passed? Of course, we know we have majority and minority leaders. We have caucuses within the caucus. So, think about those votes and that you're going to need, especially on these committees. So think about the votes that you need, count them, and ensure that you have the majority or at least enough votes to pass the bill that you're trying to get done. So second and third readings are what takes place on the House floor, but also understanding what else can happen on the House floor. So there are things where somebody may present a motion to table an argument or to table an amendment, to table a vote. Understanding that the glossary and all those terms is going to be able to help you articulate to your membership what happened and how they can go forward and best help us get this bill passed. And also, how long does the governor have to pass a bill? It varies based on if we're in session or if we're not in session. So those are all the things that are going to play a very pivotal role in helping you understand the legislative process. But of course, I know that not everybody is an audio learner. So I wanted to make sure that we had something for the visual people. Again, this is basically the drawn out version of Schoolhouse Rock. A bill starts as an idea, goes to a representative for it to be authored. The bill is composed. It goes to its committees where it can have amendments, where it can be altered a little bit, where it can be joined. And then it goes to its second and third readings within its individual house where it was sponsored. And if it passes then it goes to a Senate committee. It's heard in the Senate. Same process again, is read in. It's passed its first reading immediately upon being read in. Second and third reading happen after it's gone through committees. Now, in the event that it changes in the opposite chamber, it has to go back to the original chamber for what is called a concurrence vote. And in the event that it doesn't change, it just goes straight to the governor if it passes that chamber. So those are the things that can be known. And of course, they're available online in the event anybody wants to look further into this. But I'm here to help you guys out with that especially. So feel free to have a look at this and feel free to ask questions at the end of this if there are any. So strategy, again, is one of the things that I enjoyed the most. So being able to strategize and map out how you want to get this document and this bill passed is very critical. So let's talk about what can be done to help legislators and help you. Again, legislators are getting pulled in many different directions. So you're only probably going to have their complete attention span for maybe 10 to 20 minutes, if that. So what are some of the documents that you guys can do to help? Of course, everybody here is creative. So what about a one-pager that highlights the main points of the issue? And that's where the research comes in at. So you are able to talk about the data, talk about why you guys have this position and why your organization deems this as a very necessary issue that's going to impact children. How is this bill going to impact children? And of course, my personal favorite is discussing how this legislation is going to impact that issue. How is this going to help constituents in this member's district and across the state? And of course, we all have a soft spot for kids, but how is this going to help the kids as well? So at the very end of that is having the ask, basically, which is something we're also going to, but having to ask for either their support or opposition to some legislation, because of course we know there's bills that will be detrimental to kids at times, either intended or unintended. So being able to say, we need your support, we need you to oppose this bill. And for individuals who are going to be doing this interface and dialogue with legislators in these intimate settings, this is where you can create talking points for those individuals, for your team members and for legislators. Of course, we know as people who are not elected officials, we have to rely on the expertise of legislators to walk the bill through the legislative process. So it may be good for you to create talking points for individuals who you know are going to speak, especially for the sponsors and co-sponsors of the bill. And on that one page, you can also insert information about some fallacies that may be heard from opposing parties that can go ahead and be debunked already. I'm a fan of being proactive and not reactive. So if you know an organization spreading information that may not be completely accurate, go ahead and include that in your dialogue. Say, you're probably going to hear XYZ from such organization. However, let me prove to you why that is not accurate. And that is why you have to use those relationships, because those relationships are going to be very critical in hearing, one, how's this conversation about this bill going in their caucuses? You know, how are they hearing or feeling about the bill within the committee? That is why relationships are always going to be the bedrock of being able to be effective in what you do, and also being effective in being able to get your bills passed. And based on the content of the bill, you can predict which legislative committees it's going to be heard in. So go ahead and know where those committee members are. Set up appointments with those committees, which is why it's important to have a relationship with the staff members of those legislators, also referred to as their legislative assistants. But that's something we'll discuss later on as well. But have those conversations. And of course, the legislator is very, very big. So you may have to split those members above or among your team. So have certain members go to certain members and have you all report back to say who's going to be a yes, who's going to be a no. And for those individuals who are a no, what can we do to try to persuade them to say yes? discuss which team members will be in the committees, and having a dialogue and who will be speaking if you guys are called. And more than anything, how is it that you can best serve your membership? Is it through, giving a full transcript of the committee and what was said? Is it best by giving key points about certain legislators that of their commentary? Have those conversations to fill out which one is the best one. You guys know your membership and your organizations better than anyone. So this is where being a good team member comes into play at. Now, my personal favorite is the discussion of relationships. So relationships are literally the bedrock of all levels of government. That is how elected officials become elected. That is how elected officials stay elected. And for lobbyists like myself and for organizations like you all, that is how you are able to get so much done for your constituency, your membership, your organization, and the people that you may or may not represent. So relationships are critical, and it does not take a lot to have those. It's simply being present, having a good conversation, learning what the member is about. And my personal rule, and I've had this rule since I was an intern, I do not go to a legislator the first time meeting them with an ask. You will be surprised how many legislators have come to me and said, okay, it's good to talk to you. I'm glad we had this dialogue. Now, what is your ask? Their faces light up whenever I say, I don't have an ask. I just came here to make a relationship. And of course, they feel the genuineness from that. They know that you are here. One day you're probably going to have to come with an ask, but today is not that day. Today is the day I just want to establish the relationship. I just want to learn about you. I want you to possibly learn about me and my organization, but make the legislator feel special. Again, these are human beings. Don't just come to them when you need something. Go to them whenever you just want to say, hey, I know I'm probably going to need you in the future, but I want to make sure that today I understand who you are, your background, what are your expertise levels, what are your experiences? Majority of them have kids. What are your experiences with this issue? And that is how you begin to create the dialogue to create a great relationship. And research which legislators are experts. Again, majority of these individuals have jobs, they have college degrees, they specialize in something, whether if it's education. I can't begin to tell you how many legislators that we have that are educators or have served in a role or on the Board of Education. Get to know which legislators have young kids, college kids, middle-aged kids. Those are the things that are going to make a big difference for you, because those are the individuals who are legislators that understand firsthand what this issue, how it impacts people. And of course, majority of that information is available on their campaign sites. For the House, that information is available on their legislative profiles. And for the Senate, you're going to have to go to their campaign sites, and hopefully they'll talk a little bit about what their occupation is. But with those relationships that you have, I encourage everyone, and this is also a personal philosophy of mine, I can get along with anyone. And I know that may sound a little bit taboo, especially in the polarized nature that we have now within American government on all levels of government. But it's very important that you establish relationships with every single person, regardless of their political affiliation, because you're going to need Senate Democrats, you're going to need Democrats, you're going to need Republicans, you're going to need some of everybody to help you pass a bill. And of course, the worst time to try to create a relationship with someone is when they are already knee deep in the legislation and trying to get it passed or trying to destroy it. So have those relationships in place. And when you have those relationships in place, you are able to have real intimate conversation with the legislator of saying, this is why this issue is important. You're able to build that trust, which is something that you're going to need as well. The relationships that you create are going to help you along the legislative journey, because your legislator can give you a call if you have that close relationship and say, this member feels like this, you should go have a conversation with them. This member is thinking about doing an amendment. This member is thinking about just tanking the whole bill. Those relationships are going to be very important to you, and creating those relationships will let you know the likelihood of your bill being passed or alternative options. There may be a time where your bill doesn't get voted on, but they take language from the bill and insert it somewhere else through an amendment. And depending on the organization and those relationships, that bill sponsor will go to somebody and say, hey, this probably is not going to pass. Can we tie this in here? But that, of course, comes with having the good relationships to be able to have those conversations. And of course, in order to pass the legislation again, you're going to need Democrats and Republicans. here in we have such a very dynamic political atmosphere. Of course, our legislature is run by the Republican Party, but we have a Democratic governor. Also with that, Republicans have the majority in both houses, but in most cases it's getting close. And of course, here in North Carolina, we're a purple state. We never know how our days are going to turn out or our elections are going to turn out. So that is why it's better to go ahead and have the relationships with both sides of the aisle, even if that means you have to tell certain members to go create relationships with one party and somebody else to do another. But as an organization, you have to be able to have those relationships on both sides of the aisle if you want to be effective and if you want to get your legislation passed. And as I touched on before, it is critical as can be to make sure you do not forget your legislative assistants and your central staff. So your legislative assistants are referred to sometimes as the doorkeepers and the gatekeepers for legislators. So I've been in situations where a legislator's time on his calendar is booked solid, but LA will text me and say, hey, he's got 5 minutes. Do you want to come in and talk about your bill? That is why those relationships are critical. So as you're getting to know the legislator, get to know the legislative assistant, because they can help you in ways that are going to be critical to your mission to get your bill passed or to just increase the prominence of your organizations. So being able to have that LA on that personal level to text you, to be able to give you a call, or to try to move some things around on the calendar to work with you, it takes a relationship to do that. And of course, LAs and legislators spend a lot of time together. So I've seen it in many times, not by myself or my organization, but some people have tried to act like the legislative assistant is just an assistant that's not important, and they have a very difficult time getting into that legislator's office. And of course, with your critical staff, there are many times in the legislative process where you're going to have a legislator to co-sponsor or sponsor a piece of bill or a legislation. So in that time, they may not be the subject matter experts, so they will give clearance for essential staff to be able to talk to you as the lobbyist or as the organization that is going to have the most input on this bill. So those all come with critical relationships with the central staff and bill drafting and fiscal research, and of course with the legislators and the staff members themselves. So I'm sorry. There it is. So sorry about that, guys. I had something to pop up. So of course, we all know that there are times where we are supposed to be out front, pounding the pavement, being very visible. But fun fact, there are times where passing a bill sometimes is very necessary to be very quiet and let it go under the radar. So in your efforts, large protests and press conferences can be detrimental. But as I've always been told by the people that taught me, there's a time and a place for all of that. So of course, yes, being able to express yourself is part of your First Amendment rights. Everybody has the right to protest and speak their piece. However, when you're trying to get bills through, sometimes that can be detrimental, and we're going to cover all of that here. But I will say that yes, protests are important. Yes, being able to express yourself is important. Press conferences, very important. But however, that can sometimes come with a very unintended consequence. So oftentimes the press conferences, the protests, especially if you're name dropping, that can put legislators in a very light, which makes them a focal point for this issue. And of course, with kids are a very sensitive topic. Parents are going to feel and going to be enraged if certain things happen with their kids. And if there's bills or policies out and that are going to be detrimental, you're going to create an army of people who are, number one, saying, why won't you all pass this bill? And that puts legislators in a very tight spot, because they can become very defensive and they have to protect their reputation and many times protect their image and themselves, not from physical harm or anything, but they don't want to be put in a negative light. So that may sometimes be detrimental to your bill. And again, these are human beings with feelings and a reputation to protect, especially if they want to get reelected. So during these times, that is why sometimes being quiet and flying under the radar is sometimes a good thing, which is where those intimate conversations come into place at. I'm not telling you to be completely hands off at all, but of course, it's better to have a conversation with the legislator in his office and be respectful of saying, I disagree with you, your opposition to this bill. Let me explain it to you further of why this is important for not just my kids, which I don't have kids, but for the parents that have kids, but for you as a people and the constituents that are in your area as well. So media and press conferences can bring a great deal of attention to your issue. And there are times where bills will want to get passed, but it's got to be done in a very quiet way. Press conferences, we know that technology now, it only takes somebody whipping out a phone, and there are cameras everywhere, recordings everywhere, and social media it spreads like wildfire, which is why a lot of times, if you're going to do a press conference, you want it to be either to just introduce the bill, to say, hey, this bill is being introduced. This is why it's important for us to do this. This is why we care. We welcome our sponsors, our co-sponsors of the legislation. But, very rarely do you want to have a press conference that says this member voted no, this member has said XYZ. Those are the types of things that you want to try to avoid. But of course, press conferences say this bill is being drafted. We urge you to call your legislators to support. Those are always welcome. And we've seen instances many times where your efforts can sometimes backfire and it calls a legislator to oppose your bill because they have had to defend themselves. And if I may, I just want to backtrack one to that previous bullet point. Even in some of the clients that I have represented, and I represent very large corporations who make very big decisions. Some of these companies have even said themselves, we're going to pass this, but we want to do it under the radar. That means no social media posts, no press conferences, nothing, just the backlog conversations that are happening in the back rooms. And we will celebrate when the bill is signed by the governor, which is one of my philosophies that I like as well, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But some of those efforts that you may do can certainly backfire and cause a legislator to vote no because they have been bombarded by people saying, how dare you oppose this legislation? Or they have been having to put more effort into defending themselves and taking out of a negative light than they have had actual time to pay attention to the bill. So I would just suggest to you all that, and this goes back to figure out what works best. Is it better to be out front and pounding the pavement, or is it better and of course it's going to depend on certain issues, or is it better to just have a quiet dialogue with all the members who are going to touch this bill and celebrate later on? It's going to vary depending on your organization. It's going to vary depending on the bill, the context, and all the legislative things and the processes. But that is something to always keep in mind, is how is this going to make the legislator look? How is this going to make them look in their caucus, to their constituency, to other organizations that may be at play here? These are all the things that you have to think of when you want to discover if you want to do this quietly or be out front. And of course, the absolute best advocacy takes place behind the scenes. I know that you guys are probably tired of hearing me say dialogue in the legislator's office, but that is where you get the best understanding of who that legislator is, because when they are on that floor and about to push that button, they have a face to represent. They have to represent their constituency. But behind those closed doors is where you get to understand where this member is personally on this issue. So I encourage you all, build those relationships. On Mondays is majority of the time when your Senate member is going to be there. House members normally come in later that evening, but see who's around. And that all comes from having relationships with the legislative assistant. And lastly, of course, never be afraid to candidly tell your allies and colleagues to stand down and to have that dialogue, because again, there are unintended consequences. And of course, not everybody does legislative stuff. Not everybody does advocacy and government relations. They're just very passionate, which passion is a very wonderful thing to have. I encourage everyone, especially for kids, to have passion about these issues, but also at the same time, understand that there can be unintended consequences if you allow your membership to bombard a legislator or to have a press conference or to have a protest. But those are the things that I want you all to understand and to walk away with. And of course, I'm more than happy to have more dialogue about that with you all. So, and I know everybody is not an extrovert, and sometimes people view legislators as, very hard to reach individuals and things like that. But let's talk about some of the things that make you stand out to a legislator. The number one thing I want you all to know, and this is something I'm pretty sure your parents and my parents definitely engraved in me, and something that you engrave in your kids. You do not get a second chance to make a first impression, and first impressions certainly last. So make sure that when you're having those conversations with the legislator, you present yourself as a person with integrity and candor, because again, legislators remember who is dishonest. Legislators very rarely forget a lot of things when it comes to people skills. So understand and make sure that that person that you're sending in there, or that team that you're sending in there to the legislator, make sure that you guys are honest about what you stand for, the issues that you care about the most, the issues that you care about the least. Make sure that you understand these things. And legislators, again, have short attention spans because they're getting pulled in every single direction. So in that time, make sure that you are concise with your arguments and your points that you want to make, but also make sure that you are able to articulate that in a short amount of time and leave behind very detailed one-pagers that are not excessively long, but straight and narrow to the point of this the issue, this is what the bill will do, this is how it will impact, we need your support. Simple things that can make a world of difference in the legislator. And of course, legislators respect you 10 times more if you come and respect their time. So I encourage all of you to start looking at some of the best practices. And of course, it's going to vary depending on who the legislator is, how well they know of your organization. And sometimes they may say they want an additional 10 minutes or a follow-up conversation with you all. So make sure you're positioning yourself and you represent your organization when you step in that building. So make sure you are representing your organization as an organization of integrity, respectfulness, knowledge, and reliability. And something that just to be honest with you, I personally understand and encourage you all to do is to always show gratitude for a legislator, for their time to our great state, for the time that they are doing their job as a legislator, and more than anything, just for accepting the role to be a public servant. It is not easy to be in the eyes of 10 million people, which is our state population, at all times. And of course, social media and the media itself spreads everything so quickly. It is not easy to be a legislator. During the height of session, legislators are away from their families at least 4 to 5 days a week. They don't make a ton of money, which is why you see legislators oftentimes have to carve out time on their calendars just to take care of their job at home. Now, for those who are retired, they don't really have that problem. But some of our legislators are very young. They run businesses. They have other organizations that they are a part of. They have other things that they have to take care of as well. So those are the things that make the biggest difference in the legislator. Understanding that they are away from their family at all, God knows how long, especially when they start to travel for conferences. But more than anything, just thanking them for their time, thanking them that even though you don't make a lot of money, you are representing the people of North Carolina. And being able to balance a full-time job is stressful. So let me not add to that stress. Let me get straight to my point and maybe even conclude earlier to give you some time to call your wife or your husband or your kids, or just have some time to yourself. Those are the things that make a world of difference in the life of a legislator. And those are the things that they will remember. That person came here, they were concise, they were honest, I understood their organization, and they even left 5 minutes early, which gave me some extra time to focus on other things. That makes the world of difference in the legislator, and that is how you create those relationships, which can grow into very prosperous pieces of legislation. And who knows what else that this can grow into. And as I conclude, I just want to take a moment to say thank you all. Thank you to NC Child, of course, but thank you to every organization that is under the sound of my voice, that is in person or that is attending this conference. But thank you for what you do for our kids. And again, and to NC Child people, I'm going to take a split second here. But as a kid that grew up in rural Northeastern North Carolina, a first generation kid, the son of 2 correctional officers, I cannot thank you all enough for the opportunities that you present for everybody who was not put on equal footing. I did not have the ability to do summer schools and, be a part of, organizations and everything as a kid because of where I grew up. And also my parents were not very rich at all, but they gave me every single thing that I needed. And because of the advocacy and the efforts that you all have done, I was able to attend my university. I was able to learn how to do this. And I was able to take advantage of some of the opportunities that I was given. So I appreciate you all, because where I came from, I have it horribly, but there is somebody else that does have it much worse than what I had. So your organization plays a very pivotal role. Your efforts are very much appreciated because the kids are the future. And I personally want to believe we live in a country and a state, especially where no matter where you may have come from, your current situation does not have to be your final destination. I did not have to stay in Northeastern North Carolina. I've been able to travel to DC. I've been able to attend conferences all over the country. And I am now able to live out my dream of being a lobbyist for a global public relations firm where I've been able to do wondrous things. So thank you for your efforts for myself. Thank you for my future kids that I intend to have in the next decade. And thank you for those kids who are depending on you all right now for every single thing that you do. Your work is imperative. I thank you all, and I am here to be a resource. So please feel free to contact me if you have questions. I'm an extrovert. I look forward to networking with everyone. I love making friends. I love learning about issues that I don't know about. I don't have kids, but I would love to know some of the issues that are plaguing kids and plaguing communities, so I know how to combat those issues. And for myself personally, I'm an adjunct professor, but I'm also involved in communities. I love to do mentorship because I believe that is imperative. Let me know some of these issues that are going on. Let me know some of these things that I can tell, other people how to prepare for. This is my actual email address, and that is my personal cell phone number that stays in my jacket at all times. And that is my LinkedIn name. I look forward to networking with you all. I look forward to being able to possibly help you all, but more than anything, the same way with the legislators, I look forward to building very positive, supportive relationships with you all to help you in the best way that I can. And I'll be more than happy to make introductions for you all. I'll be more than happy to help in any way that I can, but I am here to be a resource. NC Child, thank you all so much for allowing me and blessing me with this opportunity. And more than anything, I just cannot thank you all enough. Remember, your work is imperative, and there's a reason I have a dream speech behind me. It's not just because it was given on August 28th, which is my birthday, and it was given 30 years before I was born, but because kids have dreams, and I've been able to achieve my dream because of work from organizations like yourselves, and I want other kids to be able to do the same. So with that, I yield back the floor, but I look forward to being able to connect with you all. I look forward to building great relationships and helping you all achieve your legislative goals and further the interests of our kids in our great state of North Carolina. So thank you all so much. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I look forward to hearing from you and meeting all of you.
Can we say, wow? Thank you so much to Demetrius DeLoatch for that incredible presentation. Demetrius is actually on a flight right now, y'all, to Miami. So he was joining us in the chat during his layover. So he answered a few of the questions that were submitted in the Q&A. So I'm going to just read through those briefly. So someone submitted a question that says, how can community members, people who don't have lobbyists, participate in this process? It seems way complicated. And as a provider in a community, I don't have time to follow all of this, even though I really care about some of the specific policies. So Demetrius's response to that really great question was, good morning. Thank you for your question. Community members can participate in a number of ways. Watching the news, reading the articles, and signing up for your legislators' newsletters is a way to understand what is going on. Also, you can take a few minutes to scan the NCLEG website to see which bills are being heard and voted on. Also, community organizations that are aligned on your issue may have insight on which bills are being considered and discussed. Another question was, I've heard that it is better to meet with legislators in my community versus trying to go to Raleigh. How do I set that up? What should I talk about with my legislators if I want them to understand about childcare needs in the community? And Demetrius said, thank you so much for your message. You can visit the NCLEG website and go to your member's profile and speak with their legislative assistant. They will be able to let you know the legislators' availability and begin the dialogue of setting up an appointment. So another resource that I'll throw out there for y'all is every Friday we have our legislative CAN calls, and we go over a lot of the bills and issues that are impacting North Carolina children. So we'll be resuming that weekly call April 29th. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you do that so you can hear from us. And we try to give it as real and as honest as we can. So Fawn just put the link in the chat. And to Demetrius's point, the North Carolina General Assembly's website is actually really, really, really user-friendly and helpful. So you can go on there and actually search, bills about children's needs or reading, literacy, science, whatever, and all the bills being considered during that session will pop up for you. You can also go to the tab that says who represents me and find out who represents you, but then you can see what committees they sit on, what are their priorities, and you can really tell that by how they vote on certain bills and which bills they introduce. So that's also really, really, really helpful, not just for for me and folks like Demetrius who are lobbyists and who are down there, but also for constituents. Another option that is really helpful is social media. So your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, even some legislators are on TikTok. So following them on those pages and seeing how they tweet, what they tweet about, what are they talking about? Is it nonsense? Is it, something valid? Is it something that resonates with you? So consider those vehicles of communication as well. And that's also at times can work. You can slide in a legislator's DMs and request a conversation or a meeting via in their district or on Jones Street. So with that being said, we have 1 minute left. So if anybody has any other questions, you can type them in furiously and we'll get to them really fast. And while y'all are submitting possibly last minute questions, I just want to thank Demetrius DeLoatch again for his expertise and his presentation. And also I want to thank each and every one of you for taking your time out of your day to join us for this very important conversation. The legislative process is pretty complicated. So we hope that this shed a little clarity on that process and how to navigate some of those systems. So that being said, thank you so much for your time and your attention, and we'll see you again soon.